This is the spectacular legend of La Plata Canyon, Colorado, and the ghost towns within. Howdy there, I'm Zane Lewis, and today I'll be telling you the legend of La Plata Canyon, Colorado, and the ghost towns and abandoned mines within. For over 2 centuries, dating back to the Spaniards, people have journeyed here in an attempt to strike it rich, each time meeting temporary success, but always getting stumped by the pure beauty of the area. Thousands of pioneers came to the area looking for a better life, and left dozens of mining ruins that we can still enjoy today. How were these towns and mines founded? What hardships did their residents suffer through? And what led to the area's demise? Well, just like in our previous documentaries about Colorado ghost towns, today, we'll rediscover the forgotten memories of La Plata's past, the stories of miners who built the West, and the legacy they left as legends of Colorado. Our story begins in 1775, the year when patriots in Concord and Lexington fired upon the British and started the American Revolution. That year, a Spaniard named Juan Maria de Rivera is believed to have discovered gold along the La Plata River while leading a party through the area. To our knowledge, the Spanish never attempted any further exploration of the area or the gold within. In fact, it would be almost 80 years before the next documented exploration of the area, in 1856. Captain John Moss and cede Poston left the wondrous goldfields of California to comb through the mouth of the La Plata River in 1856. During their time searching, they discovered placer gold, leading Moss to return 17 years later with another group of Californians. This time, not only did they locate gold, but they also found quartz, making the canyon even more promising. Due to provisions beginning to run out, the group trekked over 130 miles towards the nearest trading post. During this trip, Moss and Chief Ignacio of the Southern Utes Indian tribe made a treaty allowing the Californians to mine and farm the La Plata River Canyon in exchange for loads of blankets and 100 ponies. Moss then returned to San Francisco and presented the treaty to a banker named Parrott, who was so interested that he decided to fund another party to the canyon. In 1873, Otto Mears, a prominent railroad and toll roads man who shaped much of the San Juan Mountains history, negotiated a treaty between the U.S. government and the Ute Indians which ceded the San Juans, including La Plata Canyon, to the Americans, allowing prospectors to venture there without limitation. In the fall, a group of Arizonans ventured towards La Plata Canyon and reached the river valley in November, beginning to pan for gold. However, they had to retreat due to the harsh winter. Nevertheless, they returned in May of 74 and began building sluices and digging ditches to mine the gravels out of the river. Backed by the banker Parrott, Moss and his group attempted to return in April, but were blocked by deep snow. When they finally reached the La Plata River in mid-May, they found the Arizona group mining in it, and together they held a meeting where they ultimately agreed to work together. The two sides each took 20 acres, with Captain Moss's group laying out Parrott City and building a blacksmith shop in it. Each group started constructing ditches and flumes to transport water to the placer deposits to wash gold out of the gravels, with hydraulics eventually getting used to cleanse the river banks. 3 miles north of Parrott City, the Comstock mine was staked, becoming the first lode mine in the area. Thanks to this mine, over 20 mines would soon spring up in the canyon, some of which mined silver. In 1876, Parrott City became the county seat of La Plata County after an election in which Moss mobilized his men to vote for it, with the town having a population of about 50 people. A sawmill, a hotel, 2 stores, a school, and multiple other structures were constructed in the seat, with it getting a post office that same year, being misspelled with an extra T. After the county was organized, Moss became the first person to represent it as a state representative in the Colorado House of Representatives. His tenure as a politician is most notable thanks to the fact that he didn't show up to a single legislative session, thus becoming your typical lazy elected official. In 1881, despite his population growing to over 300 people, Parrott City lost out on being the county seat to Durango, which was built by the important Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. In 1885, 250 people called the town home, and out of the over 500 mining claims that had been filed, only 20 were being mined. Coal mining, coupled with farming and ranching, assisted the town's economy, but a mining engineer made a prediction that mining in Parrott City would come to an end due to the removal of all the surface gravel. After he read a report about massive boulders deep in the earth making it difficult to continue mining efforts, Tiburcio Parrott retracted his financial support of the town, and the town became yet another legend of Colorado. With its decline, the only people who remained were an old-timer and the postmaster, with the buildings getting torn down over the years and parts of the town becoming a cattle ranch. Most of the structures were raised in the 1940s, with the Barbie Hotel, the last building there, getting burned to the floor after being struck by lightning in 1963. Meanwhile, in the mid-1870s, Plata City sprang up in a flat area within the canyon next to a river and overnight became an active mining camp as placer and hard rock mining began to come to fruition in the area. By 1882, the town had a population of 200 people, and as the miners discovered the source of the gold in the river, lode mining became prevalent. That same year, the town received its post office, being called La Plata. In 1884, a woman named Bessie Rivers arrived at the town, bringing with her 6 young maidens looking for a place to build a palace of pleasure. Upon a large cabin being quickly built, business soared. One story from this time is that the women refused to leave the cabin because they were scared of bears, leading the men to call the business Bessie's Convent, and eventually just the convent. Typically, unmarried men resided in boarding houses close to the mines that they worked at, while the family men lived in Plata City. The singles had to frequently visit town for supplies, or to just have a good old time at a dance on Saturday night. The miners used their own homemade skis or snowshoes to travel to work in the town during the deep white hell known as winter. The town went through numerous boom and bust cycles, with it losing its post office in 1885, however regaining it in 1894. In 1889, over 500 people called it home. Numerous businesses were built here, along with residencies and a schoolhouse. In 1894, a newspaper article reported, quote, "A great building boom is developing at Plata City, the new gold camp near Durango. Contracts for 8 buildings were let last week, and during the next 30 days a number of other buildings planned and for which material for construction is daily arriving will be erected or begun." Due to the use of the words "the new gold camp," the article leads people to believe that the town had died before this, but given that it had a population of over 500 people just 5 years prior, it's hard to believe that it could die out and get totally revived in that short of time. In 1900, likely in late October, as reported on by the Durango Wayjourner, a fire at Plata City destroyed the commercial hotel, 2 saloons, and multiple other buildings. In September of 1911, over 250 mines still called Plata City home. The town's history dies out after this. Its post office is believed to have shut down in 1934, but it's likely that it closed before then. Today, nothing remains of the town except the field it once resided on, and much of the town site has been transformed into campgrounds. With that, Plata City, once the most influential municipality in the county, became yet another legend of Colorado. There are 2 other small ghost towns just a little outside of the canyon, called Mayday, which was named for the Mayday Mine, and Bay City, named for the Bay City Mine. Almost nothing is known about Bay City, while Mayday, likely founded in the early 1870s, once had a peak population of 200 people, but not much else is known known about this small camp. Many of the people here likely moved to Plata City after the town died out. As for the rest of the canyon, many other mines were started up, such as the Comstock vein, which was discovered by A.K. Fleming in 1873, who staked more claims in 1874 with Captain Moss and Harry Leitner. Tiburcio Parrott purchased the claims in 1875, and free drifts plus a shaft were opened by 1881. Despite this, between 1885 and the late 90s, the mine was completely inactive. After this, the mine's production levels were usually irregular until it shut down in 1931. In 1878, mineral deposits were found at what would become the Cumberland and Snowstorm deposits. Little ore was brought out of the Cumberland mine until 1884. However, after this, the mine began heavy production. A Ferdy stamp mill was constructed later on in the decade. However, it couldn't even treat the Cumberland mine's ores. In the 1890s, the mine sat idle, however was revived twice, in 1900 and 1909. It's unknown when the mine shut down for good, likely sometime around 1910. After its demise, the mine's mill building burned down, and today all that remains are two steam boilers and a collapsed mine at it. By the late 1890s and early 1900s, numerous mine complexes had been constructed in the La Plata River Valley, including previously mentioned mines like the Comstock and Cumberland, along with others such as the Gold King, Idaho, Mayday, and La Plata. Together, these mines produced major quantities of gold, but due to the high operation cost to run them, they were soon abandoned. Discovered in 1880 and named for an Egyptian queen, the Bessie G mine was renamed to just the Bessie G when the claim was patented 11 years later in 1891. Like many other mines in Colorado, it was worked irregularly throughout its existence, with the La Plata Gold Mining Corporation, located in Salt Lake City, Utah, spending over $150,000 to reopen it at some point in time. By the time it closed in 1955, its owners had made over $750,000 in profits, an astounding amount of money, with underground development beginning and a mill being built in late 1983. Despite this, the venture didn't go too far, and no further activity has happened at the site since. In 1895, the Bonnie Girl was located, producing limited amounts of gold ore until 1902. In 1904, a 50 stamp mill was constructed at the mouth of Tiburcio Creek, with it being connected to the mine through an aerial tramway. In 1906, 08, and 19, production was heavily inconsistent, and it shut down in 1919. With the discovery of the Gold King vein in 1921 by Basil Karamuzas, the La Plata Mines Company bought the property in 1927 and rebuilt the old Bonnie Girl mill, adding flotation cells, a jaw crusher, along with tube and ball mills. Additionally, they also constructed an aerial tramway between the mine and mill, which would ultimately end up being over 8,000 feet long. Between 1928 and 1935, the mill produced numerous concentrates, but eventually multiple problems forced the mine to transfer to a trusteeship in order to remain in operation, with the Fawn Mining Company operating it from 1936 to 1937 until all the ore had been extracted, which forced the mine to close down. In the early 1940s, it was explored for minerals and some sampling work was done. However, this would ultimately be the last time anything would happen at the Bonnie Girl mine. A smaller mining remnant is the Tomahawk mine in Tomahawk Basin. In 1904, the Tomahawk Mining Company built a stamp mill in the basin while conducting exploratory work, with recovery efforts yielding only 0.6 ounces of gold to the ton. Due to this, mining efforts at the mine ceased in 1911, although some still say that amethyst ores can be found in the upper basin. Last on this list, but by no means the least, the Moldon mining claims were patented in the early 1880s. However, there isn't any known documentation of the claims being worked until 1917, when gold and silver were extracted from it for 2 years. It temporarily shut down around 1919 and then reopened in 1935, being worked by an early settler named Herman Dalla. Nevertheless, it would close for good in 1936. One important person in the story of the La Platas is a woman named Olga Little. Doing a man's work, she and her team of 20 burros delivered supplies to every mine in the area, most of which were located at an elevation of over 11,000 feet. Unlike other masters, she didn't whip her burros. The animals trusted her, and likewise. There are many other mines in La Plata Canyon, all of which have their own stories and people who made them, and just like all the other historic structures in the state, they have become forgotten legends of Colorado. So, what remains of the ghost towns and mines of La Plata Canyon today? An interesting amount, actually. To start with, Parrott City, discovered by our friend Captain Moss in the 1870s, has mostly vanished, as much of it burned down, but you can still find some collapsed ruins at the town site. As for La Plata City, which became the basis for this documentary, pretty much nothing remains. Campfires occupy much of what once belonged to the town, and there are 2 plaques with descriptions of the area's history overlooking a field, where many buildings once resided all that time ago. If there wasn't a sign here, then to your average person, there would be literally no evidence at all that people once lived here. A little bit further up the canyon, you'll find multiple old houses which still have residents. These houses may have been a part of La Plata City, although I haven't been able to find anything confirming that. I actually know someone who once tried to buy a house in the canyon. All throughout the canyon you can find remains of abandoned mines, some right in your face, and others hidden in the trees, only visible to an expert eye. As you travel along the canyon, you'll notice multiple mine entrances called adits. It would be impossible for me to cover all of the mine remains without dragging the video out an extra 20 minutes, so here's just a brief rundown. All that remains of the Gold King mill are foundations, some equipment, and an old chimney. Most of the mill was burned by vandals in 2003, while the Cumberland mine has a collapsed adit with 2 old steam boilers and some cage fing, once part of the mill, laying on the ground, surrounded on all sides by gorgeous mountains. The Moldon mine still has an old structure that was likely the boarding house, while having a smaller structure which has what may be a boiler in some of its collapsed remains, with minecart rails running alongside the mountain. There's also an old outhouse in danger of falling off the mountain. The Bessie G mine along Snowstorm Peak has some very interesting remains, including rails, collapsed adits, and most importantly a wrecked car maybe dating back to the 1990s, which was apparently abandoned by drunk teenagers. The road leading to the mine is very narrow and has sharp turns, so it's amazing that it even reached the site to begin with. The Copper Hill mine, which produced copper, silver, and gold, still has multiple adits. The Allard mine has a gated off adit, and the Columbine mine has a steam boiler and multiple other pieces of machinery, including one that looks like it may have been a hoist machine, either lowering miners into the shafts or perhaps powering an aerial tramway. While not the most famous, or even the mine that produced the most gold, in my view the best abandoned mine in La Plata Canyon is the Tomahawk mine. While it only operated for a short time, it has some of the best preserved remains in the canyon. The remains of its stamp mill can still be found after a decent hike up an old wagon road, which still has many of the metal ore crushers and numerous foundations showing us that this mill was once very large. Continue up the road and you will find an old boiler laying below some mine tailings, and travel up the hill and some more mine tailings and collapsed remains can be discovered. Oh, and the mountains surrounding it make you feel like you're in Switzerland. Unlike most other mining areas that have been abandoned, some people still discuss mining in the canyon, including as recently as September 2020. The Canadian company Metallic Minerals was reported to be exploring the area for ores in September 2020. However, many of the locals do not support any further mining due to the environmental damage modern mining can cause. Overall, La Plata Canyon has left one hell of a legacy, with abandoned mines and ghost towns littering its expertly designed landscape, and hundreds of roads and trails to explore them and God's beauty. The ruins we see today are a consistent reminder of what the miners and settlers who lived and worked here achieved, and today, it's up to us to honor them and preserve the incredible gifts they left behind. The miners who built these mines, dug these tunnels, and built these towns, created the world and country we know today, all in search of a better life, some striking it rich, with others ending up broke. But no matter what, every single one of them saw some of the most incredible scenery in the country, and they left behind a legacy that I think will be remembered for years into the future. Yeah, the pioneers who mined La Plata Canyon left one heck of a legacy, didn't they? Together, they strived to create a better world for everyone, producing vital minerals that are used in everything we use today, crossing insane territory, all in search of a better life. They built these mining camps while trying to grow families and develop the West into the phenomenon it is now. Today, you can still see America's Wild West legacy and experience the country as it was then, raw, untamed, rugged, and beautiful. I'm Zane Lewis. Thanks for watching.